Hello everyone, it's Rafael Gutierrez again, and today I'm going to talk about uh, the third and fourth points that we can find in the Bubishi. Now the other thing I'm actually realizing as I've done this project is there's a lot more to this. I initially was looking at injury and angle only, but I've actually sometimes found that once you actually get to a certain injury, if you look at just at that area, you forget that there's other things that can happen as a result of that strike. And so a lot of times as I do this, I may talk about the previous strike points just to point out what happens. Now, I'm looking at the Bubishi as a way, especially the strike man, as a way to determine strikes that would either be disabling or lethal. If it doesn't do either of those, I'm not really paying attention to it. And one of the things that happens is when I do this, I actually do this for myself. I teach anatomy a lot of times, and by finding how these things work, it ends up making my class a lot more interesting. I can actually answer questions that people may not have actually been able to find out before. Now, again, I'm actually going to talk about two of the points today, and I am going to go back. And it's actually interesting because as you look at one thing, it's just like a kata. If you learn fugata ich in my style, the first kata, and you go to fugata ni, you take the stuff that you learn in fugata ni and bring it back to fugata ich. And then you actually start finding new stuff in fugata ich that you take back to fugata ni. And so it kind of works both ways. And I find that this does work in almost anything. As you learn something, you can go back and learn something else from any new information you're learning. Now and I'm always going to use this thing, the two new strikes that I'm going to talk about are going to be either on the side of the head, right around the temple area, and the eye. Now, a lot of times people think that the hitting the eye is more dangerous than it is. The truth is, if you look at the eye, I have a picture here, you have the eye, and behind it you have bone. And again, bone isn't that easy to break, and whenever you switch from one media to another, it changes the speed at which something is going. So, as one of them is the eye, and I think that's number 4 that they have, you can rupture the eye, and rupture of the eye can happen, and any damage to the eye can end up decreasing vision to a degree, even if it's just temporarily. And one of the things that I will tell you with decreasing vision is that it will decrease someone's effectiveness. Now, one of the neat things people don't realize is for you to be able to get depth perception, you need both eyes. Now, I know a lot of people watch movies and read comic books, and they have one guy who has an eye missing, and he's the greatest fighter of all times. The reality, while that may be the case, he would actually have a problem with depth perception, and so anytime he'd be working with certain types of trying to reach something, he would end up having problems until he ended up relearning how to determine depths. He might actually have to go slower. But if you lose it all at once, you actually do lose the ability to determine where something is. You know it's going to be here somewhere, but you don't know if it's going to come at you where it is distance-wise. And so the thing that ends up happening is losing an eye or having damage to an eye so it's not functioning will end up causing a disability that could end up decreasing the effectiveness of a fight, giving you an advantage. Now, what this means is that, yes, it is going to be something that could potentially end the fight, but not necessarily. Even if it doesn't end it, it gives you an advantage. The other point, which technically is point number 3, which is here, is a place called the tarea, and it's PT is how it starts. Now, I have a nice picture here. I'm going to use pictures instead of models for this one because that area is actually where the bones come together in the skull, and it ends up being the weakest point of the skull. Now, I've had a lot of problems with this because almost every clinical anatomy textbook will talk about the tarea and how people can damage it by car accidents, blows to the side of the head by blunt objects. But I wasn't able to find any articles that talks about that. Now, it may be that it just happens so often in emergency rooms that nobody's looking at it anymore, or it may be that it's something that people just assume happens and they leave it at that. Now, there is another place, and this is why I was talking about the other 2 points here, that the sphenoid can be broken. And there's a reason why its fracture is really interesting. And that is actually an axial compression on here. Again, I wasn't able to find any data on when it or how it would break like that. And I know that a lot of people do go diving and hit, you know, shallow areas and will break their neck, but they won't break the tarea on there. And so how often it happens, I don't know. It may just be if you put your skull and you continue to compress it, it will break there. Or it may actually be that there were a lot of sport injuries before that caused it to break. So that might be another reason why the first 2 points would have been a strike. But without having any real data on this, it really becomes really hard. Now, there is another thing that's a problem with the tarea. Underneath it, you have a major artery to the brain. You have a branch of the middle cerebral artery. And if that artery breaks or rips, you start developing pressure in the brain. And this we actually do know. I was able to find the hematomas in the brain causing pressure can end up causing actually enough pressure to cause part of the brain to slip through the big hole called the foramen magnum at the bottom, which can lead to death. It can also, if not seen in time, can end up leading to even if you're treated in time, you can actually lose cerebral function. So the idea is, yes, these 2 points do work, but maybe not in the way that people think they would. For instance, this one does break. How much force? Well, I wasn't able to find any data. I did find a couple articles, case studies on car accidents, but a lot of the research I did find say that potentially it could be broken in sport injuries, collisions. I just wasn't able to find it. Anatomically speaking, looking at yes, it's a thin bone, and you do have an artery there. So if it breaks, it would be the artery is actually almost embedded inside the bone. So when it actually breaks, it will end up causing a pressure in the brain and loss of function in a lot of areas. So both of them would be disabling. You could actually see that, yes, obviously, you lose an eye, you're going to have a lot of problems, especially immediately in a fight. If you have the tarea broken, well, you have a few minutes to end up getting medical attention. If not, you end up having a lot of problems. Well, you're going to have a lot of problems either way. And so, yes, we actually do find that these 2 points do break. And like I said, when I was studying the tarea, it talked about an axial compression, so it goes back to the first 2 points. Could potentially cause a fracture of the sphenoid, so it gives them a little more probability. Again, I'm looking at some of these points, and I think that some of these would obviously be easier to strike with some sort of weapon. I do bow, and if you think about bow, you actually do hit here. You can't hit across here. You can't stab. You can't use the 2 fingers to stab, as people say. You may not rupture the eyeball, but it will cause pain and loss of vision for even just temporarily. So what I am saying is, again, we're starting to see that if we look at this Bubishi and we look at it seriously, we can see that there are reasons for it to function. I know this is a short video. I am going to try to do all the Bubishi points, and as I go on, like I said, I've noticed that sometimes I wasn't thinking of the tarea, but as I started looking at the tarea, I can now see how other points work. With that said, I am actually also seeing some other things with the points which just seem amazing, and I probably will try to do a interpretation of probably Pinan Nidan or Heian Shodan for those of you who do Shotogan, looking at the strike points. There are a lot of them, and a lot of them do make sense if you understand the basic biology. Now, the thing is, the point is here, but it's actually different angles that you do want to actually hit to break. Now with this, I should actually say again what I always said. Any head injury, it doesn't matter where it is, any head injury is potentially lethal. And so always remember that. A lot of times we actually look at these Bubishi points, and this one's more likely to break, causes damage. But any sort of head injury can cause serious injury, so don't try these at home. The other thing, I'm just going to ramble a little, hope you don't mind, but the other thing that's actually interesting is someone said, well, am I not worried about, giving out these secrets? And the truth is, it's the way I actually feel is there really are no secrets in martial arts. The only secret is training and understanding, getting the human biology to get it actually perfect. But all this is available to anyone. Anyone can go and, you can go to PubMed and try to find out what different things are, what different things do. And, it's available. The other thing I actually told someone, and it's actually even more true, is if someone really wants to do damage, trying to learn techniques that do damage to the human body really aren't that effective. What I mean is, if you really want to do damage to someone, It's real easy for people to go out and buy a gun or a knife. Even if in California, yes, you can do it legally, but you can just as easy, you can also do it illegally. And people who are actually looking for somebody to do damage, they can find it. Chances are nobody's going to try to use these points to actually do damage. They're going to, if they want to do damage, they'll find other ways to do it. Uh, it's also the better living in chemistry. So I am going to be doing this for a while. I'm reviewing all the Bubishi points one by one and talking about the clinical presentation. Next time I'm going to do it'd be 5 and 6. And so I'm going to go down the body and you'll see everything. If there are any questions on this, please let me know. And someone actually asked me via email if I would be okay with doing a seminar. And I told them, yeah, you want me to do a seminar, let me know. Let me know where you want to go. If you want to come to San Diego and talk to me here, just let me know. And I'm willing to talk to anyone and train with anyone. And pretty much, one of the things I actually will say is I've met a lot of great martial artists. Sometimes we disagree on certain things. But even our disagreements, I find I get a lot. Actually, I will say I get more out of disagreeing with someone and trying to find out where their point of view comes from than the people who actually agree with me completely. A lot of times people will actually tell me something and I will be looking at it a different way. And as we start talking, we start arguing about stuff, we start saying, we're really talking about the same thing, it's just a different approach to it. And, I end up leaving the conversation with more, and I hope they do too. But with that, I'll sign off and hope you have a good day.